Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
Okay, welcome back to the podcast team, and today we are joined by me, Wei, and
A brace of mats.
a brace of mats. Is that the collective
Collective
pronoun? Noun?
pronoun.
Pronoun?
That's inflammatory.
A gaggle
A gaggle.
of nuts.
Yeah. A
A parlay.
parliament.
Parliament.
Yeah. So that is
A hoot.
The collective noun for owls is a
Really?
parliament of owls.
I like that. Classy.
There you go.
Classy. All right, a parliament of mats. Hopefully this will mean that there is amazing chat on today's podcast.
Such good chat.
What are we going to talk about today, boys?
Who's half asleep?
We're going to talk about 3D printing in saddles and why everyone is bringing out 3D printed saddles. And do we need them?
No.
Yeah, podcast over.
It depends.
Cue the music.
It depends.
It always depends. Of course it depends. We're bike fitters. That's our catchphrase, isn't it? It depends. Context is everything. So, yes, the eye of our discussion today will be 3D printed saddles. I think it's not I, is it? It's ire of our discussion.
Yeah. IRE,
Yeah,
not EYE.
yeah. Speak English way.
Ironically,
Ironically.
the person with the worst grasp of English in this room.
All right, so we've been seeing a plethora of 3D printed saddles hitting the market.
Some of them look quite exciting, to be fair.
Yeah?
Like we were talking before we hit go about the Pro Logo Scratch going
Yeah.
3D printed.
Scratch and the Nargo,
Yeah,
both.
more interested in the Scratch, to be fair.
All right.
But
Yeah. Who else is? Well, I think pretty much every major manufacturer has got 3D printing.
yeah, I mean,
out.
who even are you if you don't make a 3D printed saddle?
mean,
Even SMP have done
even
it.
SMP.
Even SMP, yeah. Are you excited about that though?
Yes and no.
I don't know. Like SMP is definitely one of your favoured perches.
But
The greatest saddle.
it is the greatest saddle. But the one I ride has no padding.
Yeah.
So I feel by adding padding,
Well,
Adding padding.
you might ruin it.
doesn't necessarily have to be very padded if it's 3D printed, does it?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? Like, you know, if it's so soft that you just sink straight onto the shell of the saddle, probably going to be great. Don't know. Are we going to get one?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Well, It's
One
on
each.
record. It's on record.
Debbie.
Debbie.
Debbie, if you're hearing us, we
She-
want one.
Debbie's not listening.
Oh.
But yeah, like, everyone's doing it.
Yeah, Pro Logo have come out with one. Sella Italia have had one for a while. San Marco have been out with one.
Fizik.
Fizik, yeah.
Specialized.
Fizik have got a whole 3D custom program, haven't they?
We use custom in inverted commas.
Custom 3D printed saddles, which on paper sounds amazing.
I take umbrage with that,
Yeah.
but we'll get into
There's
that.
definitely some theoretical issues with it.
Well, some very practical issues as well.
Yeah. But, you know,
Yeah, we'll get to that.
we like to give people the benefit of the doubt before
But the OGs of 3D printed saddle, the
Specialised.
big S,
yeah. Still there, still
there.
going.
They've just brought Phenom out,
Yeah.
which
Actually,
is now 3D printed, which is
Yeah.
actually quite exciting
yeah.
because the Phenom is
A good saddle.
very good saddle.
Was it was the Roman the first one?
I think it
Or
was the
was
Power.
all the Fizik first?
No, I think they did Power first.
I think it was the Power.
Yeah.
Oh.
But incidentally, the Power mirror, they call it, versus regular Power, it's an entirely different shape.
Yeah.
Well, theoretically, the shell is the same.
Yeah, you sit on that thing, it's
Yeah.
way different.
But this is maybe what we should get into in this episode. What are the differences between 3D printed versions of the same saddle? Who might these saddles be for? Like, why would you choose one of these 3D printed saddles? And actually, if they are offering anything more than let's say, the equivalent non 3D printed versions of the saddles. Because I think basically everybody has gone with an existing saddle shape in their library. So all the brands have gone, okay, this has been a good saddle in our kind of collection. Let's add a 3D printed, essentially upper or top to it. So to be clear, like the entire saddle itself isn't 3D printed, like the shell, the rails are not 3D printed.
In the context that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got, essentially a customized kind of, it's carbon fiber 3D printing, and it's a lot of them come out in a honeycomb kind of structure, which is kind of layered up and creates a specific kind of shape and density to form the upper layer of the saddle.
Yeah, I think the best way that I can think of to put it would be density tuned. Rather than like, I think 3D printing like is kind of a bit of a misnomer in my mind, and bear with me, I'm getting something, because the manufacturers seem to be selling it on the fact that it is 3D printed, whereas the 3D printing is literally just the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
There's nothing great, like people have been 3D printing things for ages now. There's nothing like life-changing about using a 3D printer to manufacture something. What it gives you is control over the density of the top of the saddle and where certain parts of the saddle are firmer and where they are softer.
Yeah.
And like I say, this honeycomb kind of like shape, or this honeycomb kind of like structure, I think is the better word, just gives you that ability to tune different parts of the saddle differently.
Yeah.
So it's not actually the fact that it's 3D printed, which is going to, solve all your saddle woes, because it won't. It's the fact that you can use that manufacturing process to customize the density of different parts of the saddle. And I think where, like, this is kind of where I take umbrage with Fizik's kind of approach to this, about it being a custom 3D printed saddle, because it's not.
So can you explain what exactly Fizik are doing when they talk about custom?
So when they talk about custom, Fizik correct me if I'm wrong here, but they send you a mat to sit on. Is that right?
No, they actually, so their process
am I thinking of something else?
is a little bit, so you're thinking of Posida?
Posida, that's it. Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, well, we should talk about them too, but
Yeah.
Fizik, first of all, they actually get you to go to a registered dealer who will sit you on a jig or your own bike and pressure map your saddle position.
Okay, so there's the first part I take umbrage to, but carry on.
Yeah. Then, based on that and the fitter's recommendations, as I think they try and get people to work with a bike fitter, you can choose any of their existing saddle shapes.
Second part I take umbrage to.
And then combining the air quotes right saddle shape with the pressure mapping data that they have from that fitting, they will then calibrate the density and position and density of the custom-made saddle. So let's say if you sit slightly askew with a little bit of pelvic asymmetry, you're sitting slightly further forward on the right-hand side and slightly further back on the left-hand side. So you put a little bit more weight towards the back of the saddle on the left and a little bit more weight on the front of the saddle on the right. Then theoretically, from that pressure mapping, Fizik would print a slightly denser area underneath the left sit bone and slightly further forward, so it's underneath, that denser area is underneath the right sit bone, to give you an even kind of feeling, I guess, or support through that saddle in that area. And so in that way, the saddle is kind of more customized to your body and how you sit.
Sounds very expensive and inherently flawed.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I think the average rider, like on paper, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
But as bike fitters, I think we already see some inherent flaws within that theoretical framework of, this isn't actually how saddles kind of work or should work, or how bodies work, and maybe this is not really how we should be approaching a bike fit in terms of how do we actually get a rider sitting better on a bike. I mean, I can definitely see that there are certain applications where this would be really, really useful. If there are people with structural differences in their body which they can only sit asymmetrically on the saddle, and they need a very different one side of the saddle to the other to accommodate their pedaling action. So, people with, lower leg amputees, or, a growth difference on one side or the other, or some severe restriction, so that one side of their body operates very differently to the other. And maybe the only way that they can get comfortable is to have some way of accommodating two very different sides of their body. But there are already solutions out there for that. So I don't think Fizik are doing anything particularly new in that.
I don't think that's their prime target for
sales. I don't think you'll catch any of those buzzwords on the marketing for their 3D printed Antares.
I don't know. Are they still using the animal acronyms, or not acronyms, but the
descriptive terms? Yeah, but I mean, the first point is that they only offer 3 different shapes, or 3 different kind of like base shapes. They do different widths within that. Sorry, 4 shapes now. They've got the Argo.
Yeah.
But what if you don't fit into any of those particular shapes?
Yeah, and I think that's what. When I first heard the word 3D printing, my mind went to, you could 3D print anything like that. That's the kind
custom
of dream.
Shapes, right?
Yeah, the dream of 3D printing is that you can essentially make anything almost out of nothing. So, I'm sure at some stage in the far distant future, you could just 3D print an entire bike. You just program it in, tell it all the parameters, and
we all know how that's going to end.
Well, if someone thought about it properly, then it'll be pretty good.
If someone thought about it properly, they'd go, there's some inherent flaws here.
Yeah.
There's a human body attached to the bicycle. Yeah. This probably isn't going to work.
The other dream of 3D printing is that it's quick, it's easy, and it's
you can iterate very fast.
Iterate quickly, yeah.
Huge markup.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge markup. Yeah. I'm sure Big Bike has it in the pipeline somewhere.
Big cycling.
Yeah.
100% right. 100% they do.
Well, I think you've maybe got onto the point. This is probably why we're seeing so many more brands getting in on this 3D printed saddle kind of game, because it's suddenly become a bit more accessible. Fizik can specialise with the first to the game. I think they had probably a little bit of a monopoly on that with a particular company that does all this printing. I think it's the same company that pretty much does all the same printing. But now, the floodgates have opened, and so every other manufacturer has access. And, you can find 3D printed saddles on AliExpress for 50 quid if you really want it. So the actual manufacturing process itself is not particularly spectacular, though I do think it has a particularly good application for saddles. So, just being able to customize the entire surface of this saddle does give like kind of good potential for a really good saddle design and so on. But just because, as you were saying earlier, Matt, it is, a 3D printed manufacturing process doesn't mean it's a great saddle. So maybe we should break that down a little bit more. And this will explain a bit more about our umbrage with like the Fizik concept of, this custom program. But I mean, they've put a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
So and it launched late last year, so I don't know how it's going. We should speak to a few fitters maybe who are using the system, see what feedback they're getting.
I think I've yet to see one. That's not just off the shelf.
Yeah, so like a truly customized version where you go through that process of pressure mapping and then get the saddle back based on that. Yeah. No, I've never seen one. I've only ever seen the off the shelf adaptive, they call it, once.
Yeah. So what's our so should we clarify our main gripe with that kind of Fizik model of?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to gripe,
I mean,
Yeah.
where do you
gripe
want,
with clarity.
where do you want to start? So the first thing is the pressure mapping.
Yeah.
In my head, is that pressure mapping can be a useful tool, but it can also be manipulated and influenced by a whole load of other factors. So first off, the most obvious one to me would be if the bike position could be better or isn't where it needs to be, that can influence how that rider interacts with that saddle and the pressure that they create on different points of not only the saddle but also the pelvic structure and the other two contact points on the bike as well.
But on the flip side, I guess that's why Fizik want to work with bike fitters, so that theoretically your bike position or saddle position should be good.
In theory.
It should be good before you kind of decide that you want a 3D printed saddle.
Should be good.
Should be good.
Should be.
So hopefully the pressure mapping will confirm to maybe a rider
Should do.
that what they're feeling is what they're seeing on their saddle.
Yeah.
And so that's the data point, or that's the data they need to start building a saddle. And so when they start to build the saddle, then as we were talking earlier, you can fine tune where the density of a saddle is through the custom process. So essentially they just add more material in certain areas to make the saddle firmer and therefore more supportive, and then less material where it's a bit softer and will give a little bit. So someone still has to decide on the amount of firmness and the amount of softness and where it is on the saddle. And I guess that's kind of what they're trying to use the pressure mapping to decide on. But as you were saying earlier, you're still restricted to just the Fizik shell shapes. So the 3D printed saddle uppers are printed and stuck on top of some existing saddle shapes. So you're still restricted to those saddle shapes. So if you don't fit those shapes, then whatever your kind of pressure mapped or created upper will be, it may not work for you. So that's one part of the process you need to kind of be aware of if you're going or considering this kind of process as well. I'm not sure if they give some kind of money-back guarantee or testing process or retesting.
I imagine they would, and I'd imagine as well there'd be like a period of, or I would hope there'd be a period of testing whereby you could maybe iterate it, depending on what the real-world feedback is, because people's perception of density is very different.
Yeah.
So I often find like when people, we used to have the saddle wall.
Yeah.
People pick saddles up, they press into them. Oh, this one's squidgy.
Yeah.
Or this one's rock hard.
Yeah.
And then you get them to sit on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the perception of what is firm and what is soft can be the exact opposite of what you might feel when you press it.
Yeah.
So, shape is just as important as the density of the foam, how much padding there is, like honeycomb structure, whether you're using a 3D printed saddle or what. But that perception is going to be uniquely individual to that rider, and you're only going to know what that feels like, or whether what the product has kind of given you is going to be good or bad or somewhere in the middle after a period of testing.
Yeah.
So I would hope there'd be some sort of like iterative feedback kind of period whereby, because I'm imagining this ain't cheap.
Yeah.
Just a guess.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine there'd be some sort of like, tweaks or anything like that. So it's like when you go to a podiatrist, right, and get some orthotics. There's like a bit of a back and forth once you get them. You make some tweaks, bit more here, a little less there.
Yeah, because the bike industry famous for things that are very expensive and subsequently adjustable.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm living in a bit of an idealistic world here, but yeah, you pretty much summed it up. Yeah, very expensive and very unadjustable. That is cycling in 2025, isn't it? Basically.
But this is also the issue with anything bespoke or custom made. I think everyone has a dream perception of custom being the unicorn solution. That you get something made and it's perfect straight away. But that isn't the case with anything custom. Custom just means it's more specific to you as an individual.
At that one point in time.
At that one point in time. So this applies to custom bikes, but also like suits and insoles and anything that is made for you. Like if you go to a tailor and get a suit made, you get measured up, but you always come back for a fitting afterwards to get it tweaked and to make sure that you can actually move your arms and you can swing your arms whilst you're walking. Otherwise, you'd be walking around stiff as a board and that wouldn't be any good.
And that is very much a snapshot in time, a custom-made suit.
Yeah, like the suit I wore for my wedding definitely doesn't fit anymore. And that wasn't even, fully bespoke, it was just tailored. So, the same applies to anything that is custom made and 3D printed in this sense. And so that brings us to the crux of the issue with like the Fizik process is that, well, if you're trying to 3D print something to accommodate a particular posture or sitting style on a bike, the real question behind it is like, why is that rider sitting in the way that they are? And do they actually need this customized saddle to help them enjoy their bike more? Essentially, because we know that as bike fitters, and what we're banging on about all the time is that everybody's wonky, and that's just because we're human and we have preferences and we have biases from side to side, and so no one ever sits completely symmetrically. And even if you get 50-50 power generation on your power pedals on both sides, it doesn't mean you're completely even.
We still need to do the power meter episode.
Yeah, the power is looming, isn't it?
Well, this is classic bike industry, though, isn't it? It's create a solution to a problem that's never going to go away.
Yeah, but it doesn't really help people in the long term. It's a very
short-term approach.
Yeah, short-term approach, but an extremely expensive and actually time-consuming for both rider and manufacturer to make this thing that essentially accommodates your body and maybe some asymmetry, which doesn't necessarily answer the question of like, well, why is that asymmetry there in the first place? Is it because you're particularly tight on one side? Is it because you've had an injury? Is it because your saddle's too high? Is it because you've got your cleats staggered or something like that? Anything else that could be either driven by like some other part of your bike fit, or some part of your morphology, some part of your functional movement. And so, yeah, I would rather, I guess it comes down to a philosophical question of how do you solve a problem? Do you, in this case, accommodate a body? So you set the saddle density so that a rider can sit asymmetrically on a saddle, a little bit wonky, and it holds them in that position? Or do you go about and try and figure out, well, how can we get this pelvis to sit a little bit more symmetrically if we believe that that is actually where a rider should be? They should actually be functioning in a more symmetrical way, and something else is driving this asymmetry. Because if that is the case, that something else is driving this asymmetry, maybe it's a particular habit or movement pattern or just a weakness in their body somewhere, or if that is the case, then if you create a saddle to hold them in this asymmetric position, then you're just compounding that poor movement pattern, essentially.
You know where my brain's going here?
Where?
So this customizable 3D printed saddle is essentially the modern version of an old Brooks leather saddle.
Yeah. It is, that's true.
It's just a shortcut to getting a shortcut to getting a vintage Brooks saddle.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Oh my God. So we've actually
3 times the price.
Yeah.
So we've actually taken 1 step forward in terms of manufacturing process.
Yeah.
We're about 10 steps backward in actually
just
helping riders solve their issues.
Let your body do what it naturally wants to do. Just sit on a Brooks saddle for a year.
So while you were just talking there, that's where my brain went. It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
we're back to riding horses.
Yeah.
Just 3D printed ones.
Yeah. Oh dear. We've absolutely regressed about 100 years.
Yeah, literally we have. And yet we've marketed it so well that now everyone wants to spend £300 plus
Yeah.
on...
Well, Brooks
3D
saddles
saddle.
were like the pinnacle of technology when they came out, right?
Yeah, in 1850 whatever.
Oh, do we need to go through the concept of Brooks saddles again? Well, it's essentially the same. It's like you sit on a piece of leather, it molds to your body, whatever shape that body is, and so it feels more comfortable. But in order to get that mold, you need to, air quotes, break the saddle in. So either you break or the saddle breaks first. And who's that? There was a lad who came in the other day, wasn't he? And he was coming in for a bike fit, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've been sitting on this Brooks saddle, and it's definitely broken me."
Thought it looked cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is fashion over function.
Yeah. But the idea of breaking something in basically means the saddle sags like an old sofa to accommodate your shape, but in doing so doesn't give you any support or doesn't encourage good posture.
Yeah.
And omits one of the foundations of what a saddle should do, which is give you a stable platform from which you can create power against the pedals so you can drive forward. So, yeah, essentially, yeah, that's
We've regressed.
That's what new customized 3D printed saddle could do to you.
However, what I am in favour of, potentially, I haven't quite decided yet, but I think I'm in favour of it, is existing shapes that we know work with the option of a different top to the saddle that could provide a potential solution for a certain rider.
Are we actually going to say something positive?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
So that is what I am quite up for, and the more and more saddles that have these 3D printed honeycomb tops to them based on existing shapes that we know work well, I think is only a good thing because it gives people more options to find a saddle that works.
Yeah. So we talked about the specialized power saddle earlier, and you were saying how the standard version is actually quite different to the 3D printed version. Can you talk us through that? Or what's the main differences that you find?
So I rode a power for a while, got on with it quite well, and the normal one, I don't know if you two feel the same way about this, but it has quite a bucket to it.
Yeah, it's got a rise.
So it's got a bit of a rise to it
tail.
at the tail, but a little bit of a rise at the front as well, depending on how you set the angle. And it's like not super flat, so it's not like an Antares, which is like sitting on a board, but it doesn't drop off loads at the sides.
Yeah.
Whereas the 3D printed one, for me, is way flatter front to back.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have anywhere near as much of a kind of like a ergonomic like scoop or bucket to the shape.
Yeah.
And it drops off at the wings of the saddle way more. That is kind of the two differences that I kind of feel with it. When I first sat on one, gave it maybe 45 seconds and then was like, nah, I don't like this.
Okay. So even though the base kind of shell is the same, then the actual upper changes.
The effective shape of it.
I would also add that the 3D printing adds a bit more comfort around where the central relief channel is.
Yeah, so it's a less aggressive kind of transition into the channel.
Yeah, so the power's got quite a large and deep central relief channel, essentially the hole in the middle of your saddle, which will take the pressure off your perineum so you don't get any numbness, genital numbness. But the edges of those channels are fairly firm and I'd say fairly pronounced.
They're quite sharp.
Yeah.
I would say.
Particularly as you get towards the nose of the saddle, because it's quite narrow, that nose of the saddle. Whereas on the 3D printed version, the edges are both much softer and the transition into the cutout is also a lot smoother.
Actually, the nose felt wider
Did it?
on the 3D printed one for me. It's a bit flatter,
Right.
or it feels flatter.
Yeah.
So it felt a little bit like wider for me, but
I feel like this 3D, you're really selling this 3D printed power. Speaking my language.
no, but
The regular power for me, I can't ride that if I want to preserve blood flow to the important parts.
But this is it. It is a different saddle.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of understand that these honeycomb structures can change the characteristics of the saddle on which they're based on. And I think going into that eyes wide open is quite important. Otherwise, you might get lucky and you might be all right, but you might end up disappointed with how a saddle feels based on if you have a reference point from what the non-honeycomb top saddle feels like.
Oh, we forgot to mention the density as well, which was like our main point.
Yeah.
Essentially where your sit bone should sit on the widest part of the saddle, where the kind of rear part of the saddle. So the 3D printing allows them to create a slightly denser area, so it's firmer, kind of theoretically where your sit bone should sit on the saddle. Which is the big difference. So the manufacturers can really tune where they put the different densities. So, it's nice and soft in the middle where you don't need that support, but it's firmer around the sit bones and the edges of the saddle where you do need the support.
I have a question. I'm just going to pick up this specialized mimic saddle.
Yeah.
Is that not possible with just regular foam? Because if you think about, running shoes have been doing this for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Where you have different levels of support and foam density on different parts of the shoe.
Yeah.
So why is it necessary to 3D print to achieve that?
So certain manufacturers have done it. Specialized have done it, yeah. Pro Logo have done it. Like a regular saddle is essentially the same density all the way around. It's just like a layer of foam with a synthetic cover on it, or leather cover. So the Specialized Mimic range of saddles essentially uses a few different densities of foam to create a similar kind of feeling of pressure relief in the middle, but they filled in the channel with the softer foam, so you still get some pressure relief, but the transitions from the edges into the cutout itself are less pronounced, and so you don't get the pressure points on the cutout edges. So that's an example of where they've used different foam materials, or different materials to create a different feeling across different parts of the saddle to achieve a certain kind of feel for the saddle. Even though the shape, again, they produce all the mimic saddles in the same shells as like the standard saddles. So I'd say Specialized has been pretty progressive in kind of their saddle designs for quite a while.
It's heavy, isn't it? Doesn't look cool.
God, you had to say that, didn't you?
Sat on it, man.
Such a cyclist. But if it's comfortable, it's always good. Get the carbon rail version. And Pro Logo also quite interesting in that they, I think on their Scratch model and their Proxim models, they use different density foams in different areas. And
panels, right?
Yeah, they're kind of separated into panels. But again, they have more distinctive edges to all of those panels. But the idea is that it's firmer in certain areas and moves more in certain areas in order to achieve like kind of better comfort overall where it's needed. So manufacturers are thinking about it, but I think 3D printing is a cleaner way of achieving the same results in terms of creating density, but a smoother transition overall, or a smoother upper surface overall for the saddle. So if the shape works for you and your riding position and your body, then the 3D printed upper could add that extra layer of comfort. But just it being 3D printed doesn't mean that you can omit the necessity of getting the right shape saddle and getting it in the right position as well. Those two things will drive more comfort gains than just 3D printing on its own. So yeah, be interesting. I've actually been riding a Roman 3D mirror saddle.
Yeah.
It's actually been really good, annoyingly good. One other thing about the 3D printed upper is that it's super grippy. So it does actually, I don't know if this will be really good for your bib shorts over time or not, but a grippy saddle will kind of just hold you in place, but it might just destroy the bib shorts. So I haven't ridden it.
Give it a year, we'll have 3D printed saddle specific bib shorts.
Yeah.
And they'll be 500 quid.
Yeah. But again, manufacturers like Pro Logo produced saddles with these nodules on them, which provided
CPC.
I don't know what that means, but they're little extra grippers.
Tony Martin did that with sandpaper.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
See what happened to him and his white world time trial.
How many world time trial champs did he win?
I don't know.
At what cost? Actually, one of the things that doesn't get mentioned about the 3D printed uppers on these saddles is I have had it where you put riders on it and the actual cushioning is bottomed out.
Yeah.
And they just end up sat on a shell.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
If you haven't got dense honeycomb or dense structure in the right areas, or you're loading the saddle maybe slightly in the wrong way, you can bottom it out and just sit on a shelf.
Yeah.
And that's probably not going to be that comfy.
Is there a weight limit on some of these?
I don't think there's a weight limit, but I think you just need to be careful. So you mentioned the Roman, that's kind of what made me think about it, is that it's quite soft at the front. Yeah. That's a super soft saddle. Yeah. And because it's quite narrow as well, you can bottom it out and then you'll just end up sat on two razor sharp edges, and that's no fun.
It does feel like, having ridden the regular Roman and the 3D printed version, it does feel like a completely different saddle. It is a lot softer. It's a lot more comfortable actually, in terms of where I ride out in Hertfordshire. The roads are atrocious at the moment, and I've been testing some Law shoes and the saddle.
Which is super stiff.
It's the complete opposites. My bum is just being cushioned by this 3D mesh, and actually it absorbs quite a lot of the road buzz, more than I thought it would do, without me bottoming out the saddle. And it's firm enough that I feel like I'm supported by the back end of it, so I can push against the saddle. I think for an all-day riding position, it's pretty good. If I was wanting something for racing, I probably wouldn't use it. It's just a bit too squidgy, a bit too soft.
You've been riding this saddle on a steel bike, right? Yeah. Have you tried it on your carbon bike?
No, that was the next thing to do. Yeah.
Because that would be interesting.
Yeah, because it does. I can feel the opposite when I put on my Law shoes, which are super stiff, and you can feel everything, and that in a good way. But when you're, it's a bit like my other saddle that I normally ride is an unpadded SMP saddle, which, because the shape works really well, it's super comfortable. And I like it because there is no padding, so you understand where your body is and you have a really solid platform to push from. And the same applies to Law shoes. But I can see where the 3D printed saddle has its place. If you're a regular rider out to do sporties, weekend rides and stuff, could be a really interesting option for you. And I wonder if there's enough accommodation in some of that, the squidge within the saddle, that it will just accommodate some of the asymmetries that people feel already without having to, custom 3D print stuff. And I think that's almost a better way to go than kind of really like accommodating an asymmetry. But
it's finding where the balance is, isn't it? It's for that particular individual.
Yeah.
Like, do you go full 1860s Ryder Brooks?
Yeah.
Or do you go kind of the opposite route and ride an unpadded shell?
Yeah.
There's probably
somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between.
Because really, at the end of the day, what we want is people to be aware of their bodies and what they're doing. That's our philosophy as bike fitters, to be aware, and from that to be able to make decisions about your bike riding. Do you, if you have a better body, if you have a better functionality, then you're going to get a better ride overall and better long-term health. So I'd much rather people concentrate on that. And if the saddle can help you through that, then that's great.
But it's a tool.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and you need the right tool for the specific job.
Yeah.
So just because it's 3D printed, it doesn't make it better or worse.
Yeah.
When I come in full circle,
Yeah.
it's just another option in which you can have at your disposal.
I mean, that's why, we've talked about super soft gels, foamy saddles in the past as well on this podcast, but that's kind of why they don't always work. Like, people assume that the softer the saddle, the more comfortable they are, but actually you just kind of sink into it. So you need the right balance of enough cush to give you comfort over some road bars, but enough support to support your body and for you to push against, and the right shape so that you can move well within the bike fit that you have. So that's why we've got a saddle library with like over 100 different saddles, so that we can actually get people to try different stuff out. And 3D saddles, maybe that's the way forward for you. Maybe if that's
maybe they're here to stay. Maybe they're not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a flash in the pan.
I don't know. I think they're here to stay. Like, I don't know. People love tech, don't they? So
yeah, but tech comes and goes, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think there'll be enough. I think they'll at some stage. Like, I think most the economies of scale will get to the point where 3D printing a saddle makes a lot more sense. It's iterative enough, it's quick enough, it's you're able to make the more complex shape of the saddle more easily. I think that's where it will go. Completely 3D customized saddle? Don't know. Oh, we didn't talk about Poseda, did we?
No.
Poseda? Maybe that's for another one.
Yeah.
That one doesn't work either.
No.
I'm afraid to say.
It doesn't.
Yeah. I think again
Well, for the reasons that we've
talked
previously
about,
discussed.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I mean, all these people have great intentions, and the idea is always to be helping riders. But I think before you invest a large sum of time and money into it, kind of really question what you're trying to achieve with your saddles.
And is there in what context are you thinking about changing your saddle in? Because in the spirit of maximising rather than optimising, make sure you've maximised first. Make sure your position's in a good place, making sure you're doing all the stuff with your body to try and maximise your functionality. Then maybe you can get a bit more specific.
Cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
There you go. Actually, Chan, you're riding a 3D printed AliExpress saddle, aren't you, at the moment?
This week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thoughts so
AliExpress
far?
Special. Very soft.
Very
So I'd say
soft.
it's basically it's actually unlike the majority of the AliExpress ones, which are carbon copies of, or attempted carbon copies of branded saddles. I'd say this one's more of like a very long SLR.
Yeah.
Would you say so?
Yeah, it's quite a unique shape,
Yeah.
which is kind of why we picked it.
Huge cutout.
Yeah, huge cutout. It's a bit like a SLR Boost, but with a longer nose, slightly wider nose, and a bit more drop off on the at the wings.
Yeah, it's great.
A
You can
very
see
flexy shell.
very flexible shell.
Yeah.
Not much density change across the different
Yeah,
regions. Kind of just means you can basically sit anywhere on it
yeah.
because it's so long.
But that's where we see the difference between the cheap 3D printed saddles and the kind of, I guess, mainstream brands, where, you know, just the density of the 3D printing is the same all the way around, and, you know, people are buying it just because it's 3D printed rather than it having an inherent kind of advantage. So something to look out for, something to think about whilst you're testing. So maybe we'll give you a few more thoughts when we've done a bit more testing on our different saddles, and maybe we can get Matt a 3D printed SMP saddle.
That'd be interesting.
The greatest saddle.
Is the greatest saddle.
It's just got even greater.
See how many seconds it lasts on your bike.
Yeah.
I'm not confident. I'll say that.
Well, if anyone's been riding 3D printed saddles, you got some thoughts, let us know your experiences. Love to hear from you. And if you want us to talk about anything else saddle related, let us know too. Until then, we'll say ta-ra till the next episode. Ta-ra. Oh, before you go, Matt Chan just had a revelation about some more 3D printed saddle information that we thought was important to share.
I think a revelation is overselling it.
Well, we've been doing quite a few triathlon bikes recently. And so we had a Fizik 3D printed tri-saddle in the other day.
It's an Aries long distance adaptive.
And actually, triathlon may be one of those areas where a 3D printed saddle might actually be really useful. You had a point about...
Because you are dripping wet when you come out of water.
Generally.
A dry swim. Haven't seen that yet.
And potentially a very holey saddle will help with
drainage. Yeah.
And comfort.
Yeah.
Squelch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah, if you think about saddle comfort, like the conditions for friction are what? Heat and moisture and movement. So if you can minimise moisture by
more airflow,
better drainage.
Like, have you ever gotten caught in a shower when you're out on a ride?
Yeah.
And then your saddle just gets really horrible until you dry off, which is probably not until you're back home.
You get home.
Yeah, that's how they should market 3D saddles.
Maybe they're missing a trick. Yeah.
Yeah, but also it's still grippy enough that when you are coming out of the water, that you still can stay on your saddle. Because if you've, from my triathlon days, jumping on a bike, you just slide all over the place.
Well, you're in a less stable position, aren't you? Like your pelvis is rotated further forward. You sat more towards the nose of the saddle generally.
Yeah.
So anything that keeps you in place, potentially a good thing.
And maybe that applies to all distances too. So, you know, if you are racing short course, sprint or Olympic distance, then maybe a 3D printed like Power or Romin or one of the kind of road saddles would be ideal. You know, get out the swim, get onto your bike, and dry off quickly. If you're using clip-on, you can't use clip-on aero bars
Not anymore. No, you have to have your hoods turned in instead.
Yeah. But anyway, there you go. So a little extra bonus there for you guys. 3D printed saddles may be ideal for triathlon.
We know triathletes love spending money.
That is true. That is true.
There you go.
That is true.
Whether you're doing it for practical or purely cool factor, 3D printed saddles.
We'll say though, we said this, and there's only 2 3D printed options for tri-saddles at the moment, which is the Fizik one, the adaptive, and the Celitalia one.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that changes, but triathlon's not as big a market as it used to be. So,
But it's getting more high end.
it's getting way more high end. Yeah, it's just kind of like
Yeah.
coming to an apex almost.
Or they did a Bontrager Hilo.
Well, they've stopped making that. Full stop.
I know, but if you're listening, Bontrager, if you
Sort
made
it
the
out.
Hilo in the 3D printed version, that would be ace.
What comes on? What's everyone riding on their on their canyons and tracks these days.
Yeah, just standard watt.
Salitalia watt Superflow. Yeah. Most people change it out though, I feel, for like an ISM or something, with varying degrees of success. 3D printed ISM.
Yeah.
They did a full carbon version.
Yeah, that was
I've
not
only
great.
seen, like one of those.
yeah
The rock
cracked.
solid. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, it could solve the droopy prong conundrum.
Yeah. Could do. There you go. ISM, 3D printing.
Send the check in the post.
Bosh. All right, guys. Catch you on the next one. Ciao.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.
If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.